Captain Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the UES Titan's Edge, watching the stars drift by through the main screen. His ship had been patrolling the outer edge of human space for 3 months now. It was quiet work, mostly boring, but someone had to watch the borders. The Titan's Edge was not the biggest ship in the human fleet, but it was fast and well-armed. Jake had commanded her for 5 years, and his crew knew their jobs well. They were professionals trained for anything the galaxy might throw at them. Captain called Lisa Harper from her station. She was the ship's communications officer, a young woman with sharp eyes and quick fingers. "I'm picking up something strange on the long-range sensors." Jake walked over to her station. Lisa had been with his crew for 2 years, and she never called something strange unless it really was. "What kind of strange?" "It's a signal, sir. Very faint, but it's definitely artificial. The computer says it's coming from the Kepler 442 system." Lisa frowned at her screen. "That's about 1,200 light-years from here." 1,200 light-years? Jake raised an eyebrow. "That's way outside human space. Are you sure it's not just static?" "No, sir. It's definitely a signal, and it's encrypted." Lisa's fingers danced over her controls. "The pattern is too complex to be random. Someone is trying to send a message." Jake felt a chill run down his spine. In 5 years of patrol duty, they had never picked up alien signals from that far away. The galaxy was big, and humanity had only met a few other species. Most of them were peaceful traders or explorers like humans, but there were always rumors of other things out there in the dark. "Can you decode it?" Jake asked. "I'm trying, sir, but the encryption is unlike anything I've seen before. It's definitely alien." Lisa looked up at him. "Should I wake up Ben?" Ben Taylor was the ship's chief science officer. He was probably the smartest person on the ship, and he knew more about alien technology than anyone else in the crew. If anyone could crack an alien code, it would be Ben. "Yes, wake him up. Tell him. It's important." Jake turned to his first officer, Lieutenant Commander Susan White. "Sue, set us on a course for the signal's origin, best speed." "Aye, sir." Susan's hands moved over her controls. "Course laid in. We'll be in the Kepler 442 system in 6 hours. Jake nodded and sat back in his captain's chair. Something about this felt wrong. In his experience, when someone sent an encrypted message across 1,200 light-years of space, it usually meant trouble. 20 minutes later, Ben Taylor stumbled onto the bridge. His hair was messy and his uniform wrinkled, but his eyes were alert. Ben was the kind of man who could wake up instantly when duty called. "Lisa says you found something interesting," Ben said, walking over to the communication station. "See what you can make of this." Lisa transferred the signal to Ben's science station. Ben sat down and began working. His fingers flew over the controls as he ran the signal through different decryption programs. The bridge was quiet except for the soft hum of the ship's engines and the beeping of computers. After an hour, Ben looked up. His face was pale. "I've got it partially decoded. You're not going to like this, Captain." "Let me hear it." Ben pressed a button and a strange voice filled the bridge. It was clearly alien, with sounds that human throats could never make, but the computer had translated it into English. "To any who received this message," the alien voice said, "this is Kethavar of the Zephyrian Coalition. We are dying. Our worlds burn. Our people are enslaved or killed. The Vorthon Empire shows no mercy. They hunt us across the stars like animals." The message paused, filled with static. Then the alien voice continued, desperate and tired. "We have heard stories of a species called humans. Stories say you are warriors, that you fight for justice. We do not know if these stories are true. We do not know if you even exist. But we have nowhere else to turn." Jake felt his hands tighten on the arms of his chair. Genocide. Someone was committing genocide, and they were asking for help. "We offer everything we have," the alien voice went on. "Our medical knowledge, our star charts, our technology. All of it, if you will help us survive. Please. If you can hear this, if you care about justice, help us. The Vorthons will not stop. With us, they will come for others. They must be stopped." The message ended with coordinates and then silence. The bridge was quiet for a long moment. Jake looked around at his crew. They all had the same expression on their faces. Anger. Cold, hard anger. "How long ago was this sent?" Jake asked. Ben checked his readings. "Based on the signal decay, I'd say about 6 months ago, maybe longer." 6 months. Jake closed his eyes. In 6 months, how many more had died while this message traveled through space? "Lisa, send a priority message to Fleet Command. Tell them we've received an alien distress call reporting genocide in the Kepler 442 system. Include a copy of the message and our current position." "Yes, sir." Jake stood up and walked to the main screen. Somewhere out there, people were dying. An entire species was being wiped out by someone called the Vorthon Empire, and they had asked humanity for help. "Sir," Lisa said, "I'm getting a response from Fleet Command. Admiral Rodriguez wants to speak with you directly." "Put her through." Admiral Kate Rodriguez appeared on the main screen. She was a tough woman in her 50s, with gray hair and steel in her eyes. She had been fighting humanity's enemies for 30 years. "Jake," she said without preamble, "tell me about this signal." Jake gave her a quick summary of what they had found. Admiral Rodriguez listened without interruption, her face getting harder with each word. "Could be a trap," she said when he finished. "Could be," Jake agreed. "But I don't think so." The desperation in that alien's voice sounded real. "Even if it's real, this Kepler system is 1,200 light-years away. That's far outside our territory. We don't know anything about these Zephyrians or these Vorthons." Jake understood her caution. Getting involved in alien wars was dangerous. Humanity had learned that lesson the hard way in the past. But this wasn't just a war. This was genocide. "Admiral, with respect, genocide is genocide. It doesn't matter how far away it is." Admiral Rodriguez was quiet for a moment. Jake could see her thinking, weighing options. Finally, she nodded. "I'm sending intelligence analyst Ryan Cole to your ship. He's an expert on alien cultures. I want him to verify this message and gather more intelligence, and then we'll see. But Jake, if this is real, if someone really is committing genocide and asking us for help." She paused. "Well, let's just say that humanity has some experience dealing with monsters." The transmission ended. Jake sat back in his chair thinking. Humanity did indeed have experience with monsters. And when humanity found monsters, they didn't negotiate. They didn't compromise. They eliminated the threat completely. "Sir," Susan said quietly. "Orders?" "Continue course for the Kepler system. Best speed." Jake looked around at his crew. "And people, if this message is real, if we're really dealing with genocide, then we're about to become part of something bigger than a patrol mission." 2 hours later, Ryan Cole arrived by fast courier ship. He was a thin man with sharp features and intelligent eyes. Cole had spent his career studying alien species, learning their cultures and languages. If anyone could verify the Zephyrian message, it was him. Cole spent the next 4 hours going over the signal with Ben. They analyzed every part of it, checking for signs of deception or manipulation. Finally, Cole came to the bridge to give his report. "The message is genuine," he said without preamble. "The linguistic patterns, the cultural references, the technology used to send it, it all checks out. These Zephyrians are real, and they're in trouble." "What about the Vorthons?" Jake asked. Cole's expression darkened. "I've heard of them. Reports from traders and explorers in that region of space. The Vorthons are a reptilian species with a supremacist ideology. They believe other species are inferior and should be enslaved or eliminated." "How big is their empire?" "Unknown, but substantial. They've been expanding for at least a century, absorbing or destroying everything in their path." Cole paused. "Captain, if the reports are true, the Vorthons have already wiped out at least 6 different species completely." Jake felt that cold, anger growing stronger. 6 species. Billions of lives snuffed out because they weren't the right kind of alien. "Lisa, any word from the Kepler system? Are the Zephyrians still out there?" Lisa checked her instruments. "I'm scanning all frequencies." "Sir, but it's hard to tell from this distance. There are some energy signatures that could be ships or stations, but I can't be sure. Keep monitoring. Let me know the moment you pick up anything. Jake stood up and walked to his ready room. He needed to think. In a few hours, they would reach the Kepler system. They might find survivors. They might find nothing but wreckage. Either way, humanity would have to decide what to do next. He thought about the alien voice in the message. Kethvar, the alien had called himself. There had been real desperation in that voice, real fear. Someone was out there right now, possibly dying, possibly already dead. Jake had joined the human fleet to protect people. That was what humanity did best. They protected those who couldn't protect themselves. It didn't matter if those people were human or alien. Right was right and wrong was wrong. His communicator buzzed. "Captain," Lisa's voice said, "we're approaching the Kepler system. You need to see this." Jake hurried back to the bridge. On the main screen, space looked normal at first glance. But as they got closer, the sensors began picking up details that made Jake's blood run cold. "There," Ben said, pointing at the screen. "Debris fields, lots of them." The sensors showed the remains of what had once been a thriving star system. Broken ships drifted in space. Dead planets orbited their star, their surfaces scarred and blackened. And there, hiding in the shadow of a gas giant, were 3 small ships. "Life signs?" Jake asked. "Yes, sir. Faint, but there." Lisa looked up at him. "They're alive, Captain. Some of them made it." Jake felt a moment of relief, followed immediately by determination. The Zephyrians were still alive. That meant there was still time to help them. Open a channel. The alien face that appeared on the screen was unlike anything Jake had ever seen. It had large, dark eyes and skin that seemed to shimmer with different colors. But despite the alien features, Jake could see the exhaustion and fear clearly. "I am Kethvar," the alien said in broken English. You came. You actually came. We received your message," Jake said simply. "We're here to help." Kethvar's eyes filled with something that might have been tears. "You are too late for most of us. The Vorthans, they destroyed everything. Worlds, ships, children." His voice broke. "But some survived. A few thousand, maybe less. Where are the Vorthons now?" "Gone. They took what they wanted and left, they always do." Kethvar looked directly at Jake. "Human Captain, I do not understand. Why did you come? We are nothing to you. Strangers from across the galaxy." Jake was quiet for a moment. How could he explain it? How could he make an alien understand that humanity simply could not ignore genocide? "Because it was the right thing to do," he said finally. "Because someone asked for help and we heard them." Kethvar stared at him, clearly not understanding. In the aliens' experience, species only helped their own kind. The idea that strangers would travel 1,200 light-years to help people they had never met was beyond his comprehension. But Jake understood something that Kethvar didn't. Humanity was about to show the galaxy what happened when someone committed genocide and humans found out about it. The response would be unforgiving. It would be unrelenting. And it would be absolutely final. President Alice Stone sat in the emergency session of the Security Council, her face grim as she listened to Admiral Rodriguez's report. The holographic display showed the Kepler system and the scattered remains of what had once been the Zephyrian coalition. 6 billion dead, Admiral Rodriguez said, her voice steady, but her eyes hard. Captain Morrison's team has been working with the survivors for 3 days now. The Vorthans didn't just attack military targets. They hit civilian colonies, refugee ships, even medical stations. Defense Secretary Paul Green leaned forward. "What exactly are we dealing with here? How strong is this Vorthan empire?" Intelligence Director Maria Santos brought up a new display. "Based on what the Zephyrian survivors have told us, the Vorthans control roughly 200 star systems. They have a fleet of at least 5,000 warships, maybe more. They've been expanding for over a century." "Their tactics?" President Stone asked. "Total warfare," Santos replied. "They don't just conquer. They eliminate. Any species that resists gets wiped out completely. Any species that surrenders gets enslaved. They've destroyed at least 6 different civilizations that we know of. The room was quiet for a moment. Everyone understood what they were discussing. This wasn't just another alien conflict. This was systematic genocide on a galactic scale. What are our options? President Stone asked. General Marcus Webb stood up. He was a big man with gray hair and scars from a dozen battles. He had been fighting humanity's enemies for 40 years, and he knew war better than anyone in the room. We have 3 choices, Webb said. First, we do nothing. We give the Zephyrians refugee status and let them settle in human space. The Vorthons continue their expansion, and eventually they'll reach our borders. Second option, limited intervention. We send a small fleet to help evacuate more Zephyrian survivors and establish a buffer zone. We make it clear that we won't tolerate Vorthon expansion toward human space. President Stone nodded. And the third option? General Webb's eyes were cold. Total war. We mobilize everything we have and end the Vorthon Empire permanently. The room erupted in discussion. Some council members argued for caution. Others pointed out that humanity had never fought a war on this scale. The Vorthon Empire was massive, and humanity had only been spacefaring for 2 centuries. President Stone held up her hand for silence. General Webb, what would total war require? Webb had clearly been thinking about this. Every ship in the Yar fleet, full mobilization of the military reserves, complete industrial conversion to wartime production. We're talking about the largest military operation in human history. Casualties? Unknown. The Vorthons have never fought humans before. They don't know our capabilities, but they've been fighting for a century, and they're ruthless. Webb paused. On the other hand, they've never faced kinetic bombardment weapons or coordinated AI tactics. Their experience is with species that fight like they do. President Stone looked around the room at the faces of her advisors. These were good people, smart people who had spent their careers protecting humanity. Now they had to decide whether to risk everything to protect strangers. How long do we have to decide? She asked. Admiral Rodriguez checked her tablet. Captain Morrison reports that Vorthon scout ships have been spotted in nearby systems. They're checking to make sure the Zephyrians are all dead. If they find Morrison's ship, they'll know humans are involved. President Stone finished. How long before they send a larger force? Days, maybe weeks. Not long. President Stone stood up and walked to the window. Outside, she could see the city of New Geneva, capital of the Human Federation. Millions of people going about their daily lives, unaware that their government was discussing a war that could span half the galaxy. She thought about the message they had received from the Zephyrians, the desperation in that alien voice, the plea for help from a dying species, and she thought about humanity's history, the long struggle against tyranny and oppression that had shaped them as a species. Madam President, said Secretary Green quietly, the political risks are enormous. If we lose this war, humanity could be destroyed. The Vorthons won't show mercy to a species that opposed them. And if we do nothing? President Stone asked without turning around. If we let them continue their expansion, how long before they reach our borders anyway? How long before we're the ones sending desperate messages into space begging for help? She turned back to face the council. There's something else, something we haven't talked about. What kind of species are we if we can prevent genocide and choose not to? What does that make us? The room was quiet. Everyone knew she was right. Humanity had always prided itself on protecting the weak and fighting injustice. It was part of who they were as a people. I've made my decision, President Stone said. General Webb, you have authorization for Operation Thunderstrike. Total mobilization. We're going to war. Meanwhile, 1,200 light-years away, Captain Morrison was learning the full scope of the Vorthon atrocities. His ship had rescued over 3,000 Zephyrian survivors from hidden bases and damaged ships scattered throughout the system. The stories they told made his crew sick with anger. Entire planets bombed from orbit until nothing lived. Refugee. Ships hunted down and destroyed. children separated from their parents and sold as slaves. The Vorthons hadn't just conquered the Zephyrians. They had tried to erase them completely. Dr. Amy Foster arrived on Morrison's ship 2 days after the president's decision. She was a small woman with quick eyes and steady hands. Foster was one of humanity's best weapons experts, and she had volunteered to study Vorthon technology. "What have you learned?" Morrison asked as Foster examined captured Vorthon weapons. "They're not as advanced as I expected," Foster said, turning over a Vorthon energy weapon. "Their technology is maybe 50 years behind ours in some areas, but they make up for it with numbers and brutality." She brought up a holographic display showing a Vorthon warship. "Their ships are big and heavily armored, but they rely on energy weapons and missile systems. They've never encountered kinetic bombardment or plasma lance technology." "What about their tactics?" "Straightforward. They overwhelm enemies with superior numbers and firepower. No subtlety, no advanced strategies. It's worked for them because most of the species they've fought were even less advanced." Morrison nodded. "Any weaknesses?" "Several. Their ships are designed for fighting other energy weapon users. Their armor is useless against kinetic rounds. Their formations are built for traditional space combat, not drone swarms or coordinated AI attacks." Foster smiled grimly. "They're going to be in for quite a surprise." Back on Earth, the mobilization was already beginning. General Webb had taken command of the largest military operation in human history. Ships were being pulled from patrol, duty across human space. Reserves were being called up. Factories were switching to wartime production. The response was immediate and overwhelming. When humans learned that genocide was being committed and their government was going to stop it, they didn't hesitate. Volunteers flooded recruitment centers. Workers volunteered for extra shifts in the factories. Even civilian ships offered to help with transport and logistics. Admiral Danny Clark was given command of the expeditionary fleet. He was a veteran of the Centauri War and had never lost a battle. His flagship, the UES Retribution, was the most powerful warship ever built by humans. "How many ships do we have?" Clark asked his staff. 437 warships of various classes," replied his operations officer, Commander Steve Martinez. "Plus support vessels, transports, and mobile repair facilities. It's the largest fleet humanity has ever assembled, and we're outnumbered more than 10 to 1, Clark said quietly. "Yes, sir. But we have advantages they don't know about." Clark nodded. The Vorthons had no idea what they were about to face. They had been fighting primitive species for a century. They had never encountered an enemy with advanced AI, kinetic weapons, or coordinated tactical systems. Dr. Foster had been right. The Vorthons were about to get a very unpleasant surprise. On the UES Titan's Edge, communications specialist Tom Bradley was working with the Zephyrian survivors to learn more about their enemies. The aliens were eager to help, but they were also confused by the human response. "I do not understand," Kethavar said to Captain Morrison. "Your people are preparing for war with an empire that has never heard of humans. You gain nothing from this fight." "Why do you do it?" Morrison thought about how to explain it. How could he make an alien understand that humans simply could not tolerate genocide? That they would rather risk destruction than allow mass murder to continue? "Because it's wrong," Morrison said finally. "Because someone has to stop them. Because, if we don't, who will?" Kethavar's large eyes blinked slowly. "But you could be destroyed. Your entire species could die. Maybe. But some things are worth dying for." The alien was quiet for a long moment. In his species' culture, survival was the highest priority. The idea that someone would risk everything for strangers was almost incomprehensible. "Your species is very strange," Kethavar said finally. "Maybe," Morrison agreed. "But we're the strange species that answered your call for help." Meanwhile, Intelligence Officer Jason Turner was intercepting Vorthon communications. The aliens were indeed sending scout ships to check on their genocide. They wanted to make sure no Zephyrians had escaped. "They're being very thorough," Turner reported to Morrison. 3 scout ships so far, all checking different parts of the system. They're looking for survivors. Have they detected us?" "Not yet. We're running silent and staying in the gas giant's shadow. But if they do a deep scan? Morrison nodded. They couldn't hide forever. Soon the Vorthans would find them. And when they did, they would learn that the Zephyrians had found allies. The war was about to begin. On Earth, President Stone was meeting with representatives from other human colonies. The news of the Vorthan genocide had spread quickly, and the response was the same everywhere: anger, determination, and a grim resolve to see justice done. The Mars Republic is contributing 37 ships, reported Governor Lisa Wang, plus industrial support for the war effort. The Titan colonies are sending 22 ships and volunteer crews, added Administrator Robert Kim. One by one, every human world pledged support. This wasn't just Earth's war, this was humanity's war. The entire species was united in their determination to stop the Vorthans. President Stone felt a moment of pride. This was humanity at its best. When faced with injustice, they didn't hesitate. They didn't calculate odds or worry about profit. They simply did what was right. But she also felt the weight of responsibility. She had committed humanity to a war that could destroy them. If they lost, if the Vorthans proved stronger than expected, human civilization could be wiped out. The price of failure was extinction, but the price of inaction was becoming the kind of species that ignored genocide. And that was a price humanity was not willing to pay. In the Kepler system, Captain Morrison received a message from Admiral Rodriguez. The fleet was assembling. In 2 weeks, the largest military force in human history would arrive to begin the war against the Vorthans. Morrison looked out at the debris fields that had once been Zephyrian worlds. Billions of innocent beings had died here. Children, families, entire civilizations wiped out because they were the wrong species. But the Vorthans had made one critical mistake. They had committed genocide, and they had let word of it reach humanity. Now, they were going to learn what happened when humans discovered monsters in the dark. The response would be swift, overwhelming, and absolutely final. The gathering storm was about to break, and when it did, the galaxy would never be the same. Admiral Danny Clark stood on the bridge of the UES Retribution, watching as his massive fleet dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the Kepler system. 437 human warships appeared in perfect formation, their weapons powered and shields raised. It was the largest military force humanity had ever assembled. Ships from every human world, crewed by volunteers who had left their families to fight strangers in a war that was not their own. But they were here because it was right, because someone had to stop the genocide. "All ships report ready, Admiral," said his communications officer, Lieutenant Janet Brooks. "Captain Morrison is requesting permission to come aboard." "Granted. And Lieutenant, send a message to all ship commanders. We're here to end this. No half measures, no mercy for war criminals." 20 minutes later, Captain Morrison materialized on the Retribution's transporter pad. Behind him came Kethvar, the Zephyrian who had sent the original distress call. The alien looked amazed as he saw the size of the human fleet through the ship's windows. "So many ships," Kethvar whispered. "You brought your entire fleet for us." "Not our entire fleet," Admiral Clark said. "Just the ones we need to finish this war." They walked to the bridge where Clark's senior staff was waiting. The tactical display showed the Kepler system and the positions of all human ships. It also showed something else that made Clark's blood run cold. "Report," Clark ordered. Lieutenant Commander Sarah Martinez, the fleet's tactical officer, pointed to the display. "Long-range sensors are picking up a massive energy signature approaching from the Vorthan Empire. Estimate arrival in 6 hours." "How massive?" "At least 50 ships, sir. Maybe more." Martinez paused. "They're not trying to hide. They're coming. In fast and loud." Clark nodded. The Vorthans had detected the human fleet. Now they were sending a force to investigate. Soon humanity would face its first test against the empire that had been terrorizing this part of the galaxy for over a century. "What do we know about Vorthan tactics?" Clark asked. Captain Morrison stepped forward. "Dr. Foster has been studying their technology. The survivors have told us about their methods. They rely on overwhelming firepower and superior numbers. They've never faced an enemy with our level of technology. Show me, Clark said. The tactical display changed to show typical Vorthan battle formations. Their ships were large and heavily armored, designed to absorb massive amounts of damage while delivering devastating energy weapon strikes. They fought in tight formations, using concentrated firepower to break enemy lines. They're used to fighting species with similar technology, Morrison explained. Energy weapons, missile systems, traditional space combat tactics. They've never encountered kinetic bombardment or coordinated AI attacks. Clark studied the display. The Vorthon approach was straightforward but effective. It had worked against dozens of species over the past century, but they had never fought humans before. Dr. Foster, what are our advantages? Dr. Amy Foster stepped forward. She had been working around the clock to analyze Vorthan technology and develop countermeasures. Several, Admiral. First, their armor is designed to absorb energy weapon hits. It's nearly useless against kinetic rounds traveling at significant fractions of light speed. She brought up a new display showing human weapon systems. Second, they've never faced coordinated drone attacks. Our AI systems can control hundreds of autonomous weapons simultaneously. Third, their sensors are optimized for energy signatures. Our stealth technology should be very effective. Weaknesses? They're not stupid, and they have a lot of experience. If we let them adapt to our tactics, they could become dangerous. We need to hit them hard and fast before they figure out how to counter us. Clark nodded. The plan was simple. Use humanity's technological advantages to deliver a crushing blow before the Vorthons could adapt. Show them that genocide had consequences. Admiral, Lieutenant Brooks called out, we're receiving a transmission from the approaching fleet. Audio only. Put it through. A harsh, guttural voice filled the bridge. The computer translated it into English, but the arrogance and contempt came through clearly. Unknown vessels, you are trespassing in territory claimed by the Vorthan Empire. This system has been cleansed of inferior species. You will withdraw immediately or be destroyed. Clark picked up the communicator. This is Admiral Danny Clark, of the Human Federation. We are here to investigate reports of genocide committed against the Zephyrian people. We demand you withdraw from this system immediately. There was a pause. Then harsh laughter came through the speakers. Humans, we have heard rumors of your pathetic species. You dare to interfere with the great work of the Vorthon Empire? You dare to question our right to cleanse inferior races from the galaxy? I'm questioning your right to exist, Clark said coldly. You have committed genocide. That crime will not go unpunished. Foolish mammals, you will learn why the Vorthon Empire has dominated this region for a century. Your ships will burn, and your species will be added to our list of conquered races. The transmission ended. Clark looked around the bridge at his officers. They all had the same expression he felt. Cold, hard anger. All ships, this is Admiral Clark. The enemy has refused our demand to withdraw. As of this moment, we are at war with the Vorthan Empire. Remember why we're here. Remember what they did to the Zephyrians. Show them what happens when humans encounter monsters. The Vorthan fleet dropped out of hyperspace 4 hours later. 53 massive warships arranged in a traditional battle formation. They were impressive vessels, each one larger than most human ships. They had been designed to intimidate as much as to fight. War Prince Skarath commanded the Vorthan fleet from his flagship, the Worldbreaker. He was a veteran of dozens of campaigns, and he had never lost a battle. In his experience, most species surrendered when they saw the size of his fleet. Those that didn't were quickly crushed. Report, Skarath ordered his tactical officer. The alien fleet consists of 437 vessels of unknown design. They are maintaining formation at the edge of the system. Skarath's reptilian eyes narrowed. 400 ships was more than he had expected, but they were smaller than his vessels, and numbers alone had never been enough to defeat Vorthon military superiority. Open a channel. Let me speak to their commander. Admiral Clark's face appeared on the Vorthon view screen. Skarath studied the alien carefully. Humans were mammals, weak and soft compared to the mighty Vorthans. This one looked old for his species, with gray hair and lined features. But there was something in his eyes that Scareth didn't like. A cold determination that reminded him of his own species. "I'm War Prince Scareth of the Vorthan Empire," he said. "You have one final chance to withdraw from our territory. Surrender now, and we will allow your species to serve as slaves rather than face extinction." Clark's expression didn't change. "Counteroffer. Surrender now, and we'll let you face trial for war crimes instead of summary execution." Scareth's claws extended in rage. No inferior species had ever dared speak to him that way. "You will die screaming, mammal. Your entire fleet will burn, and then we will hunt down your homeworld and cleanse it of your pathetic species." "You're welcome to try," Clark said calmly. Then he cut the transmission. Scareth turned to his fleet commander. "All ships, attack. Formation. We will show these humans why the galaxy fears the Vorthan Empire." The battle began 30 minutes later. The Vorthans charged forward in their traditional formation, energy weapons blazing. It was an impressive sight, designed to terrify enemies and break their will to fight. But the human fleet didn't break. Instead, they did something the Vorthans had never seen before. "Sir," called the Vorthan sensor operator. "The human ships are launching something. Thousands of small objects." "Missiles?" Scareth asked. "Unknown. They're too small and moving too fast for our sensors to get a clear reading." What the Vorthans were seeing were human combat drones, hundreds of autonomous weapon systems, each one guided by advanced AI and armed with kinetic rounds. They swarmed toward the Vorthan fleet like angry insects. "Point defense systems engage," Scareth ordered. The Vorthans opened fire with their defensive weapons designed to stop incoming missiles. But the human drones were faster and smarter than any missile. They dodged and weaved through the defensive fire, their AI systems calculating optimal attack patterns in real time. The first drone reached the world breaker and fired a single kinetic round. The tungsten slug, accelerated to a significant fraction of light speed, punched through the Vorthan armor like it was paper. The ship shuddered as internal systems exploded. "Impossible," Scareth roared. "Our armor is impenetrable." But more drones were arriving every second. Each one fired its kinetic round and then self-destructed to avoid capture. The Vorthan ships, designed to absorb energy weapon hits, were helpless against the kinetic bombardment. On the Retribution's bridge, Lieutenant Commander Martinez watched the tactical display with satisfaction. "Drone attack successful, Admiral. Enemy ships are taking heavy damage." "Phase 2, Clark ordered. "All ships open fire." The human fleet opened up with their main weapons. Plasma lances, designed to cut through the heaviest armor. Kinetic cannons, firing rounds at tremendous velocity. Torpedo spreads guided by AI systems that could predict enemy movements. The Vorthans tried to return fire, but their formations were breaking apart. Ships that had never taken serious damage were now crippled and burning. Energy weapons that had terrorized dozens of species were useless against human shield technology. "Sir," the Vorthan communications officer called out desperately, "we're receiving surrender requests from 17 ships." Scareth couldn't believe what he was hearing. Vorthan ships didn't surrender. They fought to the death. But as he watched, his fleet being systematically destroyed by an enemy he had underestimated, he began to understand the scope of his mistake. "All ships retreat," he ordered. "Emergency hyperspace jump." But it was too late. The human fleet had surrounded them, cutting off escape routes. The battle that Scareth had expected to last hours was over in 14 minutes. On the Retribution, Admiral Clark watched the last Vorthan ship explode. The engagement had been so one-sided that he almost felt sorry for them. Almost. "Casualties?" he asked. "None, sir," Martinez reported. "Minor damage to 3 ships, but no casualties." Clark nodded. The Vorthans had never faced an enemy like humanity. They had been fighting primitive species for so long that they had forgotten what real military technology looked like. "Open a FRAU. Channel to the surviving Vorthan ships," Clark ordered. Several damaged Vorthan vessels appeared on the screen. Their commanders looked stunned, unable to comprehend what had just happened to their supposedly invincible fleet. "This is Admiral Clark. You have 2 choices. Surrender unconditionally and prepare to face trial for war crimes, or be destroyed where you sit. You have 60 seconds to decide. One by one, the surviving Vorthon ships powered down their weapons and surrendered. They had seen what human military technology could do, and they had no desire to experience it again. Back on the Vorthon homeworld, High Command was receiving reports of the battle. The news was so shocking that many refused to believe it. An entire Vorthon battle fleet destroyed by an unknown species in less than 15 minutes. Send a message to all fleet commanders, ordered Supreme War Leader Thax. These humans are more dangerous than we thought, but they are still just one species. We will gather our full strength and crush them. But Thax was making the same mistake that had doomed Scarath's fleet. He was thinking like a Vorthon, used to fighting species with similar technology and tactics. He had no idea what humanity was truly capable of when they decided to end a war permanently. Admiral Clark stood on his bridge, looking out at the wreckage that had once been a Vorthon fleet. The enemy had been confident, arrogant, convinced of their own superiority. They had never imagined that their genocide could have consequences. Now they knew better. The word would spread throughout the Vorthon Empire. Humans were real, and they were coming. The species that had terrorized this part of the galaxy for over a century was about to learn what it felt like to be afraid. The war had begun, and humanity's response to genocide was exactly what the galaxy should have expected. Unforgiving, unrelenting, and absolutely unstoppable. The news of Scarath's defeat spread through the Vorthon Empire like wildfire. For the first time in over a century, a Vorthon fleet had been completely destroyed. The survivors told stories that seemed impossible. Ships that fired invisible weapons, tiny attackers that moved too fast to stop, an enemy that fought unlike anything they had ever seen. Supreme War Leader Thax stood before the Vorthon High Council, his reptilian features twisted with rage and confusion. Around him, the greatest military minds of the Empire struggled to understand what had happened. 53 ships, Thax said slowly. Gone in 14 minutes, not retreated, not damaged, destroyed. Perhaps Scarath exaggerated the enemy's strength, suggested War Commander Vex. Fear can make defeats seem worse than they were. Thax activated a holographic display showing the battle. The images came from the few escape pods that had survived the fight. Watch and tell me if this looks exaggerated. The council watched in silence as human drones swarmed over Vorthon ships like deadly insects. They saw kinetic rounds punch through armor that had withstood decades of warfare. They watched energy, weapons that had conquered dozens of species, fail completely against human shields. What manner of beings are these humans? Whispered War Minister Krath. It doesn't matter, Thax said. They are just one species. We control 200 systems. We have 5,000 ships. We will gather our full strength and crush them. But even as he spoke, Thax felt something he had never experienced before. Doubt. The humans had not fought like any enemy he knew. They had been cold, efficient, ruthless. There had been no honor in their attack, no glory, just systematic destruction. Meanwhile, Admiral Clark was meeting with his fleet commanders aboard the Retribution. The victory over Scarath's fleet had been complete, but it was only the beginning. Intelligence reports showed massive Vorthon fleets mobilizing throughout their empire. They're not going to underestimate us again, Clark told his officers. The next engagement will be different, larger, more desperate. Captain Nina Gray nodded. She commanded the stealth destroyer UES Shadow, one of humanity's most advanced warships. Intelligence suggests they're pulling ships from across their empire. We could be facing thousands of vessels. Let them come, said General Marcus Webb, who had arrived with additional ground forces. The more ships they send, the more ships we destroy. Eventually, they'll run out. Clark appreciated Webb's confidence, but he knew the real war was just beginning. The Vorthons had been shocked by their first defeat, but they were still a vast empire with enormous resources. This would not be a quick campaign. What's our next target? Asked Captain Morrison, who had remained with the fleet as a liaison to the Zephyrian survivors. Clark brought up a holographic map of Vorthon space. Red dots marked their major military installations and occupied worlds. Intelligence has identified their primary shipyard complex in the Rigel sector. If we can destroy their ability to build new ships, we can start evening the odds. The shipyards are heavily defended, warned Intelligence Officer Jason Turner. At least 200 ships on permanent patrol plus orbital defense platforms. Then we'll need to be creative, McClark said. Captain Gray, I want your stealth squadron to reconnaissance the target. Find us a way in. As the human fleet prepared for its next operation, the true scope of humanity's response to genocide was becoming clear across the galaxy. This was not a rescue mission or a limited intervention. This was total war conducted with ruthless efficiency. Captain Gray's stealth ships slipped through Vorthan space like ghosts. Their advanced cloaking technology rendered them invisible to enemy sensors, allowing them to observe Vorthan installations without being detected. What they found confirmed intelligence reports. The Rigel shipyards were massive, stretching across multiple asteroids and artificial platforms. Hundreds of Vorthan warships were under construction, along with the massive industrial infrastructure needed to support them. There, Gray said, pointing to a section of the complex. The central power station. If we can take that out, the entire facility goes dark. Her tactical officer, Lieutenant Mike Chen, studied the display. Heavy defenses around the power station. Energy shields, defensive batteries, at least 50 patrol ships in the immediate area. What about a synchronized attack? Suggested Commander Lisa Park from the stealth cruiser Phantom. Hit multiple targets simultaneously, create confusion. Gray nodded. That could work. But we'll need the main fleet to create a distraction. Draw off some of those defenders. Meanwhile, Major Chris Evans was preparing for humanity's first ground operation of the war. Intelligence reports indicated that the Vorthons were holding thousands of alien slaves in camps throughout their territory. These beings had been captured during previous conquests and were being used as forced labor. The camps are lightly guarded, Evans briefed his officers. The Vorthons never expected anyone to attempt rescue operations this deep in their territory. Most of the guards are second-rate troops, not their elite forces. What about the slaves themselves? Asked Captain Jennifer Lopez, commander of the 3rd Marine Battalion. Do we know what condition they're in? Bad, Evans replied grimly. Malnutrition, disease, psychological trauma. Many have been in captivity for years. We'll need medical teams standing by for immediate treatment. The plan was ambitious. While the main fleet attacked the Rigel shipyards, special forces teams would simultaneously hit a dozen slave camps across Vorthan space. It would be the largest rescue operation in human history, conducted in the middle of enemy territory. Back on Earth, President Stone was dealing with the political challenges of an expanding war. Some members of Congress were becoming nervous about the scope of the conflict. Humanity was committing enormous resources to fight an enemy most humans had never heard of. The latest polls show public support at 87%, reported Chief of Staff Daniel Wright. But that could change if we start taking heavy casualties. Then we'll have to make sure we don't, Stone replied. General Webb assures me that our technological advantages are decisive. The Vorthons can't adapt fast enough to counter our tactics. What about the other alien species in the region? Are any of them willing to help? Stone shook her head. Most are too terrified of Vorthan retaliation to openly support us. But they're watching. If we succeed, if we actually defeat the Vorthan Empire, it will change the entire balance of power in this part of the galaxy. The attack on the Rigel shipyards began at 800 hours, ship time. Admiral Clark's main fleet emerged from hyperspace in a standard battle formation, immediately drawing the attention of Vorthan defenders. Enemy fleet approaching, called the Vorthan base commander. All defensive units, intercept. The Vorthan response was exactly what Clark had hoped for. Ships poured out of the shipyard complex to meet the human threat, leaving their installations more lightly defended. It was a textbook example of how the Vorthons thought. Direct confrontation, overwhelming force, traditional tactics. While the Vorthan fleet moved to engage, Captain Gray's stealth ships were already inside the complex perimeter. Moving silently between the massive construction platforms, they approached their primary targets. All teams report status, Gray whispered into her communicator. Shadow 2 in position at Power Station Alpha. Shadow 3 targeting communication hub. Shadow 4 ready to strike the command center. Execute, Gray ordered. The stealth ships opened fire simultaneously, their weapons targeting critical infrastructure rather than defensive positions. The central power station exploded in a brilliant flash, plunging entire sections of the complex into darkness. Communication arrays went silent, cutting off coordination between defense platforms. "What's happening?" demanded the Vorthon base commander as his screens went dark. Before anyone could answer, the main human fleet opened fire. But instead of engaging the Vorthon ships directly, they targeted the shipyard facilities themselves. Plasma lances cut through construction platforms like hot knives through butter. Kinetic rounds smashed into half-completed warships, turning months of work into scrap metal. "They're not fighting us," realized the Vorthon fleet commander. "They're destroying the shipyards." By the time the Vorthons understood what was happening, it was too late. The humans had accomplished their objective. The largest shipyard complex in the Vorthon Empire was burning wreckage, and with it, hundreds of warships that would never be completed. Meanwhile, Major Evans and his Special Forces teams were hitting the slave camps. The operations were swift and brutal. Human soldiers equipped with advanced armor and weapons struck at locations across Vorthon space simultaneously. At Camp Designation 7743, Evans personally led the assault. The facility held over 2,000 alien slaves from a dozen different species. The guards, unprepared for a military assault, surrendered or fled within minutes. "Medical teams move in," Evans ordered as his soldiers secured the facility. "Priority treatment for the worst cases." Dr. Sarah Kim, the mission's chief medical officer, was appalled by what she found. "These conditions are worse than our worst historical examples of concentration camps," she reported. "Deliberate starvation, disease, psychological torture. This isn't just slavery, it's systematic dehumanization." Similar scenes played out at camps across Vorthon territory. Human special forces, moving with precision and overwhelming firepower, liberated thousands of alien slaves in a single coordinated operation. The Vorthons were stunned. In one day, humans had destroyed their primary shipyard and freed slaves from a dozen heavily guarded facilities. The attacks had been coordinated across hundreds of light years, executed with perfect timing. "How is this possible?" Supreme War Leader Thax demanded. "How can they coordinate attacks across such distances?" His intelligence chief, a scarred veteran named Gorvak, studied the reports with growing unease. "Their communication technology is beyond our understanding. They can coordinate fleet movements in real time across interstellar distances. They know where we are before we know where they are." But it wasn't just technology that made the human war machine so effective. It was their approach to warfare itself. The Vorthons fought for conquest and glory. Humans fought to solve problems. They identified what needed to be done and did it with ruthless efficiency. Political officer Kevin Wright was documenting everything for the war crimes tribunals that would follow. Every liberated slave was interviewed. Every Vorthon atrocity was recorded. The evidence was overwhelming and undeniable. "The systematic nature of their crimes is staggering," Wright reported to Admiral Clark. "This isn't the result of military excess or individual cruelty. This is official policy, implemented across their entire empire." Clark nodded grimly. He had seen the evidence himself. Children separated from parents and sold to different worlds. Entire families worked to death in Vorthon factories. Intelligent beings treated as disposable property. "Make sure everything is documented," Clark said. "When this war is over, when we put the survivors on trial, I want the galaxy to see exactly what the Vorthon Empire represents." The Zephyrian survivors were amazed by the scope of human operations. Kethvar watched from the Retribution's bridge as reports came in from across Vorthon space. Shipyards destroyed, slaves liberated, military installations reduced to rubble. "Your people fight unlike any species I have known," he said to Captain Morrison. "There is no joy in it, no passion, only cold purpose." Morrison nodded. "That's because this isn't about glory or conquest. This is about justice, about making sure genocide never happens again. But the cost, Kethvar began. The cost of stopping genocide is always less than the cost of allowing it to continue, Morrison replied. We learned that lesson the hard way in our own history. As reports of human victories spread, other alien species began to take notice. The Vorthons, who had seemed invincible for over a century, were being systematically dismantled by a species most had never heard of. Some alien governments began secretly providing intelligence to human forces. Others quietly began preparing for a galaxy where Vorthon power no longer existed. The balance of power was shifting, and everyone could feel it. But the Vorthons were not finished. Supreme War Leader Thax was gathering the largest fleet in their history. Every available ship, every trained warrior, every weapon they possessed. If the humans wanted total war, they would get it. The final confrontation was coming, and it would determine not just the fate of the Vorthon Empire, but the future of the entire galaxy. Admiral Clark stood on his bridge, reading reports of successful operations across human space. The liberation campaigns were working. The Vorthon war machine was being dismantled piece by piece, but he knew the hardest fight was yet to come. When cornered, even monsters could be dangerous, and the Vorthon Empire, facing extinction, would throw everything they had into one final, desperate battle. Humanity was ready. They had shown the galaxy what happened when genocide was discovered. Now they would show what happened when it was punished. The response would be unforgiving, unrelenting, and absolutely final. Commander Cross stood on the bridge of the UES Retribution, watching the last Korthak ships burn in the cold vacuum of space. 3 days of constant fighting had left his fleet, battered but victorious. Every enemy vessel in the Zalathi system was either destroyed or surrendered. The aquatic world below glowed blue and peaceful, its cities no longer under bombardment. Sir, we have confirmation from all squadrons, reported Communications Officer Amy Foster. The Korthak fleet is eliminated. No survivors detected attempting to escape. Cross nodded grimly. Behind him, War Master Thekvar sat in restraints, his reptilian features twisted with rage and disbelief. The Korthak commander had watched his entire invasion force systematically destroyed by what he considered inferior beings. You have doomed your species, Thekvar hissed through his translator. The Great Fleet approaches your home systems. Thousands of ships carry enough firepower to burn your worlds to ash. You could have saved yourselves by staying away. Cross turned to face the alien prisoner. We don't negotiate with murderers. Your people chose to commit genocide. Now you face the consequences. Captain Sarah Williams approached from the tactical station. Her ship, the UES Determination, had taken heavy damage in the final assault but remained operational. Commander, we're receiving reports from the Zalathi surface. Colonel Davis confirms all Korthak ground forces have surrendered. The occupation is over. Casualties? Cross asked. Lighter than expected. The Zalathi resistance provided excellent intelligence about enemy positions. Our Marines were able to hit them where they were weakest. Cross allowed himself a moment of satisfaction. Operation Righteous Fury had succeeded beyond all expectations. The experimental weapons developed by Dr. Stone had proven devastatingly effective. Kinetic penetrator rounds punched through Korthak energy shields like paper. Electromagnetic pulse devices disabled entire enemy squadrons in minutes. But the victory came at a price. 15 human ships destroyed, over 300 crew members dead. Each loss weighed heavily on Cross's conscience. These people had died far from home, fighting for aliens they had never met. Commander, called Navigator Lisa Chang from her station. We're receiving a priority transmission from Admiral Wells on Earth. The main screen flickered to life, showing Admiral Patricia Wells in her command center. Her expression was tense, but determined. Nathan, congratulations on your victory. I know what it cost you. Thank you, Admiral. What's the status of the Korthak threat to Earth? Wells smiled grimly. That's why I'm calling. The extermination fleet Thekvar mentioned arrived at Sol System 2 days ago. They expected to find our colonies defenseless while our main fleet was away. Cross felt his stomach tighten. And they were wrong. Admiral Henderson's home fleet was ready for them. We also had advance warning from the intelligence you provided. The Korthak found themselves facing prepared defenses and new tactics copied from your success. The screen showed tactical displays of the battle for Earth. Human ships used the same hit-and-run tactics that had worked at the Zalathi homeworld. Kinetic weapons and EMP devices, mass-produced after Dr. Stone's successful tests, proved equally effective against the enemy extermination fleet. The Korthak commanders expected easy victories against scattered human colonies, Wells continued. Instead, they faced coordinated resistance using weapons they had never encountered. Their rigid tactical doctrine couldn't adapt fast enough. Cross watched the battle recordings with growing amazement. Human fleets at Alpha Centauri, New Geneva, and Kepler 438 had all defeated Korthak forces using the same principles his fleet had developed. The enemy's superior individual firepower meant nothing when their ships couldn't target human vessels moving in unpredictable patterns. The extermination fleet retreated after losing 60% of their ships, Wells concluded. They're heading back to Korthak space, but they won't make it. Admiral Henderson is pursuing them with everything we have. War Master Thekvar struggled against his restraints, his translator crackling with fury. Impossible. The Great Fleet was unstoppable. No inferior species has ever defeated Korthak forces in open battle. Captain Williams stepped forward. You made a critical error. You assumed we would fight like the other species you've conquered. But humans don't follow your rules. Cross studied the tactical reports from Earth. The patterns were clear. Every human commander had independently developed similar solutions to Korthak advantages. Mobility over armor, flexibility over rigid doctrine, innovation over tradition. There's more, Admiral Wells said. We're receiving diplomatic communications from 17 different alien species. Word of your intervention has spread throughout this region of the galaxy. They're asking for human protection from the Korthak Empire. Dr. Susan Wright entered the bridge, her xenobiology team close behind. She carried data tablets filled with information about Zalathi biotechnology. Commander, you need to see what our allies have offered us. The scientist activated a holographic display showing Zalathi medical and engineering advances. Living ships that could repair themselves in battle, healing techniques that could regenerate lost limbs, biotechnology that could terraform dead worlds in decades rather than centuries. They're sharing everything, Wright explained. Not just with us, but with any species willing to resist Korthak expansion. The Zalathi have been in contact with other victims of the Empire. They're forming a resistance network. Cross felt the weight of history settling on his shoulders. This war had started as a rescue mission for one threatened species. Now it was becoming something much larger. A galactic revolution against tyranny. Sir, called Tactical Officer Linda Gray, long-range sensors are detecting multiple hyperspace signatures approaching our position. The bridge crew tensed, hands moving to weapons controls. But the signatures resolved into friendly vessels, ships from a dozen different alien species, all flying toward the Zalathi system. Commander Cross, came a transmission from the lead vessel. This is Captain Reefsinger of the Aquilan Free Fleet. We offer our services in the war against the Korthak Empire. Similar messages arrived from Mantis Hive ships, crystalline Vorthon cruisers, and organic vessels from species Cross had never heard of. Each transmission carried the same message. They had witnessed humanity's intervention and wanted to join the fight. War Master Thekvar stared at the communications displays in growing horror. You don't understand what you have done. The Empire spans thousands of systems, millions of ships, billions of warriors. This rebellion will be crushed. Cross walked over to the Korthak prisoner. Your empire ruled through fear. You made other species believe resistance was hopeless. But we showed them something different. We showed them that bullies can be defeated. The bridge doors opened as Colonel Frank Davis arrived with his senior staff. The Marine commander looked tired, but satisfied. Ground operations are complete. Sir, all Korthak installations have been secured. We found evidence of planned mass executions. The Zalathi population was scheduled for complete extermination within the week. The colonel's words silenced the bridge crew. Everyone understood how close they had come to witnessing genocide on an unimaginable scale. 12 billion innocent lives had been saved by their intervention. "What are your orders, Commander?" asked Captain Williams. "Do we return to Earth or continue operations here?" Cross considered the question carefully. Earth was safe. The immediate threat had passed. But the war was far from over. The Korthak Empire still controlled hundreds of enslaved worlds. Millions of beings still suffered under alien oppression. "We stay," Cross decided. "This is no longer just about Earth or the Zalathi. This is about establishing a principle that will define the future of this galaxy." He activated the fleet communication system, addressing every human ship in the system. "All vessels, this is Commander Cross. Our mission has evolved beyond its original parameters. We came here to answer a distress call. We're staying to ensure no species ever has to make that call again." The response from his fleet was immediate and unanimous. Every captain volunteered to continue the fight. They understood that returning home would leave their new allies vulnerable to Korthak revenge. Dr. Stone's team had already begun integrating Zalathi biotechnology with human weapons systems. The results were impressive. Ships that could heal battle damage. Weapons that adapted to enemy defenses. Technology that seemed to blur the line between engineering and biology. "Commander," reported Intelligence Officer Paul Anderson, "we're intercepting Korthak communications from throughout their empire. The news of their defeats is spreading. We're detecting rebellions on at least 30 worlds." Cross smiled grimly. The Korthak Empire had built their power on the assumption that resistance was futile, but humans had proven that assumption wrong. Now their former victims were learning the same lesson. War Master Thekvar slumped in his restraints, the fight finally leaving him. "You have destroyed everything we built over millennia. The order we imposed on chaos, the peace we maintained through strength." "You didn't maintain peace," Cross replied. "You enforced silence. There's a difference." The main screen showed the Zalathi homeworld, its blue oceans sparkling in the system's twin suns. Cities that had been burning 3 days ago were already beginning to rebuild. The aquatic species possessed remarkable recovery abilities, both biological and technological. "Sir," called Amy Foster from Communications. "Priority message from Earth. Admiral Wells requests immediate conference with you and the Allied fleet commanders." Cross nodded. The real war was just beginning. The Korthak Empire would not accept these defeats without retaliation. They would marshal their full military strength to crush the growing rebellion. But humanity had already proven that overwhelming force could be defeated by superior tactics and unbreakable will. The galaxy was learning that tyranny was not inevitable. Freedom was possible for those willing to fight for it. As alien ships continued arriving in the Zalathi system, Cross realized that history would mark this moment as the beginning of a new age. Not just for humanity, but for every species willing to stand against oppression. The distress signal that had started this war had been answered. But the response had grown beyond a simple rescue mission. It had become a declaration that the strong would no longer prey upon the weak without consequence. Commander Cross looked out at the fleet assembling around his flagship. Human vessels alongside alien ships of every conceivable design. Former enemies united by common cause. Former victims transformed into warriors. The Korthak Empire had ruled through fear for 1,000 years. That reign of terror was ending. In its place, something new was being born. An alliance based not on domination, but on mutual protection. Not on fear, but on hope. The war was far from over, but the outcome was no longer in doubt. Humanity's response to the alien distress call had been unforgiving toward the oppressors and unrelenting in defense of the innocent. That response would reshape the galaxy forever.